You remember the scene from One Punch Man and other shonen series alike? Well, today we'll be drawing 1,000 hands in that multiple punch dynamic shonen manga action. Whyt Manga here, the creator of Apple Black, available everywhere, Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, you name it. And the panel we'll be working on is a panel straight out of Apple Black Volume 4. We've seen it in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, we've seen it in One Piece. If you're a huge fan of the genre, you know what I'm talking about. The character delivering the attack is Caesar, and I've done a one-page version of this where he did 100 hands. So it's one of those situations where the character is doing an upgraded version of the move for a tougher opponent, the main character, Santa. Usual stuff, storyboard, sketch, then I'll do the inking, and initially I did the inking traditionally when I did the single page years ago. Scanned into Clip Studio Paint, put speed lines where I need to put speed lines. This was our final. But now we're going to do an upgraded version, especially since I've improved as an artist since then. So we start with the storyboards. And this is me storyboarding the actual manga page. I used to draw my storyboards in my sketchbook, but now I do it all digitally because I save a lot of time. Talked a little bit about this in one of the previous videos. But now my storyboards are all digital. And I wanted to maneuver, especially since it's 1,000 hands, upgraded from 100. I wanted something bigger, bolder, across 2 pages. Something wild, dynamic, and fun to look at. I decided I wanted Caesar this time to be on the lower left, but then a lot of the moves and hands would be all over the place while showing Sano on the upper right receiving all the hits. The good thing about this is you don't even actually have to have too crazy an understanding of drawing hands, because a lot of the times all the hands are in motion, so you can just have like quick strokes just to have that sense of motion all directed towards the actual target. Head, shoulders, and then the basic idea of where all the hands are going to go. Also making sure that Caesar is visible during all this. To have the hands all going in that direction, do something a little bit more unique. And rather than having Caesar in one position delivering all the hits, I can actually draw multiple Caesars in the same panel as well. The same way we have multiple hands, we can actually draw the character 3 times, almost like he's delivering the hits from multiple positions, but it's just him moving fast between positions. This I thought was a little unique. Maybe I've seen it somewhere, but it's usually rare. Normally the character is in one position, delivering all the hits. And then we have our character taking all the hits, and that definitely is going to be in one position, and he's getting hit from all angles. I decide where he's going to be yelling. I decide where the text balloon is going to be placed. A vague idea of where the sound effects are going to be placed, usually close to where the impact is. And then voila. Now time for the inks. Again, if you've been following the channel, I don't have a detailed sketch of everything. I'm just kind of jumping straight into it, going off of the rough layout, and just having fun as best as I can. I may draw the basic shape of the hand and where it's directed and its position and its hand gesture. And then I have a lot of lines that are pointing towards the direction of motion to help sell that sense of motion with all the hands. And sometimes some of the hands, depending on how fast they're moving, they're just going to be like a weird, sketchy blur. But for the 3 positions of the character, those would be less blurry and less sketchy because he is standing in those positions more than not. The hands are the ones that are moving the fastest. I already have the sound effects placed where I need them because I know that's where a lot of the hits are. And these drawings can be a little bit tricky because it's almost like you have this character with multiple arms at the same time, but you don't have to worry too much about where they're connected on the body. You can all just be very sketchy, and the reader, the viewer, will kind of know what's supposed to be happening, especially if they're familiar with the genre and familiar with moves that are like. In a way, it's like this controlled sketch that's fun and fluid and dynamic. You have all these hands popping out, and the reader kind of knows what's happening without you having to be extremely logical. They understand that the character is moving a lot and the hands are moving a lot, so nothing actually has to be connected to anything. So I'm just drawing some hands, and as you can see, some of these hands have 0 details, honestly. Not 0, but I'm just having fun sketching and just focus more on the sense of motion. Even in animation, in positions like this, if you pause at the right frame, it all kind of looks like weird blurs with lines pointing towards the direction of motion to help sell the motion itself. What I call the ORA ORA ORA. No idea what that means. Now the palm itself, you do want to have a decent understanding of hand gestures. They still need to look like hands, and the proportions still need to make sense, especially if it's close to the actual position, the body position that it's coming from. But again, it's much less focus with nailing that than anything else. And then also with this character, because of the type of character he is and the techniques he's utilizing here, it's not necessarily punches It's almost like palms and thrusts, which are tied to the character's fighting style. So you also want to keep those things in mind. Not every time it's a punch. In this case, it's more of like a hard thrust. Pause. Or don't pause, I don't care. This is actually one of my favorite moments in this fight, especially because of the line of dialogue. Here, you're just looking at this page, but I think if you knew the context leading up to this page in Volume 4, I'm really curious to see how fans and readers take it. But I personally think it's cool. Now, am I biased? Sure. But who cares, you know? I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to explain it too much. I kind of want the book to speak for itself for the most part. But I do remember fondly putting this together and being happy with the outcome. I also remember when I was storyboarding it and seeing what I was going to put myself through. After I was done storyboarding and looking at what I had to do, what I knew was coming with the inking, because this is very tedious. I'm drawing a lot of hands, a lot of hand gestures. It's very detailed. And you know, I guess us artists love punishment. One of the things I recommend if you're trying to pull something like this off would be to study a lot of greats, study a lot of artists that you admire who do similar things, and try to figure out how best you can utilize some of the techniques that you see, and figuring out what that translation means in your art style. What can you bring to it? How can you make it work for your own style? And things like that. An example here is me kind of experimenting with the character's position, and I ended up adding an extra element of dynamism to the panel. Again, you want to keep track of some of the hand positions. Some of them will be closer to the camera, so some hands will be bigger than others. Again, helping to sell more sense of depth and drawing the hands in different camera angles, different positions. It just keeps everything fresh and natural. Then the points of impact and the character that's getting hit. You also want to make sure that the camera angle of that, the anatomy overall, everything needs to be on point. Facial expressions, how you shade. Every time you're shading, you're generally shading towards the point of motion. It just keeps that energy on the panel. If you switch it up, there is like a break. So you want to be consistent throughout. Even the parts here where generally this panel and everything is black and white for the most part, outside of some tones. Even the black and whites are not just filled in black. How they're going to be filled in, as you will see, are still within that sense of motion. It's almost like the lines are pointing towards something or have some weird perspective, but it still has one vanishing point. Sometimes thinking about this, I always wonder if I ever get an anime, how this would be animated. I think that would be really cool. Though, for those who are interested in all of that, I can almost guarantee that if a chunk of y'all, say 100,000 of y'all, which would be very difficult, but let's say 100,000 of y'all out of the 4 books in the series so far, if at least 100,000 of y'all had at least one book, trust me, the chances of an anime dramatically increase like crazy. Already in talks with some networks, and those will only strengthen our sides. But it's too early to kind of take a little deep dive into all of that. When the time truly comes, you guys will know. And for those who have already gotten the books, highly appreciate it, and really thank you guys for giving the book a shot. Again, do not miss Volume 4. Do not miss the whole series, Volume 1 to 4. 4 is just more of like a season finale that kind of answers some questions while also asking some newer, cooler questions that I can't wait for you guys to experience. Definitely gave it my all in all volumes, and all are pretty good. You can go check out the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. I just think 4 is my best because it's the most recent. It has my most recent artwork, my most recent improvements when it comes to storytelling, and I think it ties the whole story in a nice way where it almost gives an appreciation to the previous volumes, where you can go check out some other things where, oh, that's why this piece of the puzzle here, this piece of the puzzle here, and it all kind of comes together in the 4th, while still being strong and entertaining in their own right for those individual volumes. I've gotten a lot of good feedback for some of the things that went down in the previous volumes, even like Volume 3, that are huge. Again, everything's really sketchy. I'm not worried about, his legs or, the rest of his torso. It's supposed to be fun, quick motion, and just having fun, and it actually works better this way. You think in layers, and you don't have to worry about the rest of the anatomy, just the parts that we as the viewer get to see. Now focusing on Sano, our main character here, who's getting torn to shreds. Getting a general shape of the hair and how that's going to be moving. Getting some of his hands and other body parts, making sure the anatomy is on point. Thankfully, my rough sketch and the layout also took some of that into account. I have less struggles here. But once that's done, like I mentioned earlier, even his black pants, the way the lines are filled in, I'm not just filling his pants black. You could do that depending on your style, but I think to keep things even more dynamic and maintaining that energy, I'm filling it in with tight strokes, all pointing to that one direction. Pause, don't pause, is up to you. So we do that for the pants. You give in more strokes just to make sure that it's clear that the pants are black or dark pants versus the strokes in, say, Caesar's arms, because those will be lighter than Sano's pants. So you want to make that clear distinction, giving one more strokes than the other. Then we'll be doing the same thing for his black hair. And just looking at the panel, taking a step back, you can see that it's all pointing towards that familiar vanishing point. Like everything is in that direction. Then I have some like sweat, dust particles, blood, also surrounding the area of impact. Keeps things even more dynamic. Adding some speed lines at the upper left edge, making sure the lines don't conflict too much with the straight lines of the speed lines and the more organic lines of all the hands. Show a little bit of separation, putting the sound effects back on. Then I have this extra layer of just white lines going over everything. If all the lines are so connected, then it kind of loses some of that energy. And so I have a new layer above it all of just white lines still pointing towards that general vanishing point for all the impact. And they're thin and they go across the whole thing in an organic way, following all the hands towards the target. I had another layer for more dust, more blood, things like that. It's kind of up to you and just freestyling and just looking at the drawing overall and seeing what's necessary, what's needed, and just adding to it. Because to a degree, you don't have to do all of this. It depends on you, depends on your style, and depends on that translation that we talked about earlier. And then after all that, the same way we added the tones before when we did the singular page, we do it for this double spread. Not necessarily filling it all in, but same way we filled in the black hair, we'll fill it in for all the hands and for Caesar since his skin is toned. And then for the most part, you're done. I played around with duplicating the layer of the line art and then putting it over it, reducing the opacity and just giving it a slight shift just to give it that extra sense of motion. A very digital technique. I did it mostly for the hands, not so much Caesar's faces or Sano's, but I think it gave it that extra edge. And this is how the page ended up looking in the end. Drawing 1,000 hands, and Sano getting those hands. Please do all the engagement stuff. It helped the channel a great deal, as well as getting the books and watching more videos. Follow me, all my socials are in the description. I'm everywhere. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm Audi 9000.